Little girl heard the guards speaking Russian and warned the vampire king to cancel. The meeting. Chapter 1. The warning in the dark. The girl shouldn't have been in the corridor at all. Elena pressed herself against the cold stone wall, her breath shallow, her heart hammering against her ribs. The guards' voices drifted through the arched doorway, low, clipped, unfamiliar. Russian. She'd learned enough of the language during her year as a translator's assistant to recognize the cadence, the harsh consonants that marked men who'd traveled far from home. Tomorrow night, the meeting with Volkov. He won't suspect. The Krovnaya house wants him dead before the winter solstice. Her fingers curled against the stone. She shouldn't understand this. She shouldn't be here, lurking in the servants' passages of the Thornwood estate like a thief. But grief had made her reckless, and loneliness had made her desperate for any distraction from the empty apartment waiting across the city, the one that still smelled like her sister's perfume. Though Margot had been dead 3 months, the estate's housekeeper had hired her for extra hands during the season's gatherings. Elena had needed the work, needed something to fill the hours that used to belong to laughter and shared meals, and the certainty that she wasn't alone in the world. Now she stood frozen, listening to men plan murder. Volkov never changes his schedule, the second guard said. He'll come to the north wing at midnight, like always. We strike when he enters the gallery. The first man laughed, cold and low. The king of shadows, brought down by hired blades. Ironic. Elena's breath caught. King of shadows. She'd heard the staff whisper the name, always with a mixture of fear and reverence. The master of Thornwood, though he was rarely seen. A recluse who kept strange hours and stranger company. She'd glimpsed him once from across the ballroom during a gathering. A tall figure in black, who moved like smoke and watched the crowd with eyes too sharp to be entirely human. She'd thought him merely eccentric, dangerous perhaps, in the way wealthy men often were. But this, the guard's footsteps echoed, moving away. Elena waited until silence settled over the corridor before she slipped from her hiding place, her mind racing. She should leave, collect her coat, walk out the servants' entrance, and never return. This wasn't her world. These weren't her people. And getting involved in the violent affairs of the wealthy would only lead to ruin. But Margot's voice whispered in her memory, "You can't just watch bad things happen and do nothing. Lena, that's how we lose ourselves." Her sister had died because someone had done nothing, had looked away when they should have intervened, stayed silent when they should have spoken. The driver who'd run the red light had been texting. The witnesses had been too afraid to stay. The system had been too slow to care. Elena's jaw tightened. She moved through the corridors with the careful steps of someone who'd learned to be invisible. The estate sprawled like a Gothic labyrinth, all vaulted ceilings and shadows that seemed to breathe. Candlelight flickered in sconces, though she'd never seen anyone light them. The air smelled of old books and something else, something faintly metallic that made her skin prickle. She found the North Wing's gallery easily enough. She'd cleaned it yesterday, a long room lined with portraits of pale figures in antique clothing, their eyes following her as she dusted frames and polished floors. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, lost in darkness. Moonlight spilled through tall windows, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow, empty. For now, Elena hesitated at the threshold. What was she doing? Even if the master of Thornwood believed her unlikely, what could she possibly tell him? "I overheard your guards planning to kill you, sir." "No. I don't know who hired them." "Yes, I'm just the temporary help." Absurd. But she stepped inside anyway, because the alternative was walking away. And she'd done enough of that in the months since Margot's death. Enough hiding. Enough silence. "You shouldn't be here." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a low, precise tenor that seemed to resonate in her bones. Elena spun, her pulse spiking, and found him standing in the shadows near the far wall. She hadn't heard him enter, hadn't seen him move. Close up, he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, though something about him suggested age beyond counting. Pale skin, dark hair that fell across his forehead, features carved with the kind of harsh beauty that belonged in museums. He wore black, head to toe, and his eyes were wrong. Too bright, too still. The color of winter ice reflecting firelight. Her voice failed her. She swallowed, forced herself to meet that unnerving gaze. "Your meeting tomorrow night. You need to cancel it." He didn't move, but the air between them seemed to sharpen. "Explain." "The guards," Elena said, the words tumbling out too fast. "I heard them speaking Russian. They're planning to kill you when you enter the gallery at midnight." Someone called the Krovnaya house hired them. Stop. He raised one hand, and Elena's breath froze in her chest. He crossed the space between them with impossible speed, silent as death, until he stood close enough that she could see the absolute stillness of him. No rise and fall of breath, no flutter of pulse at his throat. Not human. The thought arrived with perfect, terrible clarity. How? He said softly. Do you know that name? I told you. I overheard. The Krovnaya house is not common knowledge. His gaze held hers, relentless. You shouldn't exist in their world. You shouldn't know their language. And you certainly shouldn't be standing in my gallery, alone, in the dark, warning me of assassination attempts. Elena lifted her chin, refusing to step back, even as every instinct screamed at her to run. Then consider yourself lucky. I'm exactly the wrong person in the wrong place. Cancel your meeting. Or don't. I've done what I came to do. She turned toward the door. Wait. The word wasn't loud, but it stopped her like a physical barrier. She looked back, her heart pounding, and found him watching her with something that might have been curiosity or might have been hunger. What's your name? Elena. Elena. He said it carefully, tasting the syllables. You've given me a gift tonight. Whether intentional or not, his smile was slight, dangerous. The question is, what price will it carry? Before she could answer, the gallery doors burst open. 3 men in dark uniforms flooded in, weapons raised, not guns, but blades that gleamed with an oily sheen. The vampire, because that's what he had to be, moved like liquid shadow, placing himself between Elena and the attackers. Run, he said quietly, but Elena had already made her choice. She stayed. Chapter 2. Blood and Sanctuary. First attacker lunged before Elena could process the command to run. The vampire Volkov, they'd called him, caught the blade barehanded, his palm closing around steel that should have cut to bone. Instead, the metal screamed, bending like soft wire under his grip. He moved with a precision that made violence look like choreography. The guard's arm twisted, bones cracking with sounds that made Elena's stomach lurch. The blade clattered to the floor. Volkov's other hand found the man's throat, and there was a wet snap before the body crumpled. Elena pressed her back against the wall, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She'd seen bar fights, domestic disputes that spilled into the street, but this was different. This was execution dressed as defense, efficient and terrifyingly cold. The second guard charged. Volkov caught him mid-stride, faster than Elena's eyes could follow, and drove him into one of the portrait frames. Glass shattered. The guard's head lolled at an unnatural angle. The third hesitated, his weapon trembling. Smart man. Who sent you? Volkov's voice remained level, conversational, as if he weren't standing amid spreading pools of blood. The Krovnaya house doesn't hire incompetence. You were meant to be a distraction. The guard's eyes flicked toward the gallery's far entrance, the one Elena hadn't noticed, hidden behind a tapestry. Volkov smiled without warmth. Ah, he moved again, that impossible speed, and caught the guard's wrist before the man could trigger whatever signal device he'd been reaching for. There was a brief struggle, then stillness. The body joined the others, 3 men dead in less than a minute. Elena's legs threatened to give out. She locked her knees, forced herself to stay upright, to keep breathing, despite the copper salt smell of blood filling her lungs. Volkov turned to face her, and she saw it now, the wrongness she'd sensed earlier made manifest. His eyes had darkened to black, pupils blown wide. Blood stained his hands, his sleeves. A thin line of it traced his jaw, where one of the guards had managed a glancing blow. He looked like a monster wearing a gentleman's face. You should have run, he said quietly. You told me to. Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. I chose not to. Why? She didn't have a good answer. Shock, maybe. Stubbornness. The same self-destructive impulse that had kept her cleaning apartments and translating contracts in the months after Margot died, trying to fill a void that couldn't be filled. I warned you, she said instead. Seemed rude to leave before seeing if I was right. His expression shifted, something that might have been amusement in a creature capable of such things. You were right. But this was only the first wave. The Krovnaya house plays long games. He glanced toward the hidden entrance, his jaw tightening. They'll have more waiting, and they'll know now that I've been warned. So what do? I disappear. He moved to the window, looking out over the darkened grounds. Let them think they've succeeded. Regroup. Determine who in my household betrayed me because someone did. Those guards knew my schedule to precisely. Elena processed this, her mind still catching up to the reality of what she'd witnessed. Vampires. Actual vampires. Not the romanticized creatures of novels, but something far more dangerous, ancient predators with their own politics, their own wars. She should leave. Walk away while he was distracted. Find the servant's exit. And never look back. But Margot's voice whispered again. You can't just watch bad things happen. Take me with you. Volkov turned. Those strange eyes, fixing on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Excuse me? You said they know you've been warned. If I leave, they'll find me. Question me. Elena forced herself to hold his gaze. I heard them. I know about the Krovnaya house. That makes me a liability, doesn't it? Yes, he said simply. Then take me with you. Wherever you're going to hide, I'll be safer there than anywhere else in the city. He studied her for a long moment. And Elena had the unsettling sense of being catalogued, assessed. Her worth calculated by metrics she couldn't begin to understand. You don't know what you're asking, he said finally. My world isn't kind to mortals. My world hasn't been particularly kind either. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. I've got nothing to go back to except an empty apartment and a job that barely pays rent. If someone's going to kill me, at least let it be for something more interesting than overhearing the wrong conversation. Volkov's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered behind those dark eyes. Recognition, perhaps. The understanding of someone who knew what it meant to have nothing left to lose. If you come with me, he said slowly, there are rules. My kind were not what your stories have made us. We don't sleep in coffins or fear garlic. A pause. But we do require blood. And we do kill. And once you step into our world, you can't unknow what you've learned. I already can't unknow it. Elena gestured to the bodies. I'm fairly certain that ship has sailed. He almost smiled. Almost. What's your full name? Elena Volkov. She caught his sharp look. It's a common surname. No relation, I assume. In Russia, perhaps. Here he shook his head. Coincidence or fate? Either way, it complicates things. Before Elena could ask what he meant, a sound echoed from deep within the estate, breaking glass, shouted voices. The second wave, arriving faster than expected. Volkov moved to her side in a blur of motion, his hand closing around her wrist. His skin was cool, not quite cold, and his grip was gentle despite the strength she knew it contained. Stay close. Don't speak unless I tell you to. And if I give you an order, his gaze locked with hers. Obey it immediately. Your life will depend on it. Elena nodded, her throat too tight for words. He pulled her toward the hidden entrance, pausing only to retrieve a long coat from a chair she hadn't noticed. He draped it over her shoulders, black wool that smelled of cedar and something older, earthier. Welcome, Volkov said quietly, to the night court. Then they plunged into the darkness beyond the tapestry, leaving the blood and bodies behind, and Elena felt the last threads of her old life slip away like smoke. Chapter 3. The safe Husethi tunnels beneath Thornwood stretched like veins through ancient stone, lit by phosphorescent moss that cast everything in sickly green. Elena stumbled over uneven ground, Volkov's hand still locked around her wrist, pulling her forward with relentless purpose. Behind them, voices echoed sharp commands in Russian, the scrape of boots on stone. How many? Elena gasped. Too many. Volkov didn't slow. The Krovnaya house sent a full unit. They want this finished tonight. They rounded a corner, and the tunnel split into 3 directions. Volkov chose the leftmost path without hesitation, pulling her into darkness so complete that Elena could only trust his grip, and hope he could see what she couldn't. The air grew colder, damper. The smell of earth and old water filled her lungs. Where are we going? She whispered. Somewhere they won't follow. His voice came from just ahead, steady, despite their pace. The old catacombs connect to the river district. I have a place there, nothing official, nothing tied to my name. Elena's legs burned, her breath coming in ragged pulls. She'd never been athletic, had spent most of her life bent over translation work or curled in library corners. This running through underground passages while assassins hunted them, this belonged in someone else's story. But Margot was dead, and Elena had stopped believing in the safety of ordinary life. Volkov stopped abruptly, and Elena nearly collided with his back. She felt him tense, his head tilted as if listening to something beyond human hearing. They've split up, he murmured. 2 groups, one following, one circling to cut us off at the river exit. Can you fight them? Not all of them. Not while protecting you. He turned, and even in the darkness, She could sense his gaze on her. I need you to do exactly as I say. Can you manage that? Elena nodded, then realized he might not see it. Yes. There's a chamber ahead 30 meters. When we reach it, I'm going to create a distraction. You'll hide in the alcove to the right. There's a niche carved into the wall, deep enough to conceal you if you stay still. Don't move. Don't breathe loudly. Don't make a sound until I come back for you. And if you don't come back, his hand tightened fractionally on her wrist. Then wait until dawn. The catacombs have emergency exits marked with red stones. Follow them up, stay in public spaces, and get as far from the city as you can. It wasn't reassurance, but it was honest. Elena appreciated that more than empty promises. They moved forward again, slower now, Volkov's movements careful and precise. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, just as he'd set, a circular space with a domed ceiling lost in shadow. Ancient columns lined the walls, their surfaces carved with symbols Elena didn't recognize. Volkov guided her to the right alcove, his hands surprisingly gentle as he positioned her in the narrow space. The stone pressed cold against her back, damp seeping through the borrowed coat. Stay here, he said quietly. No matter what you hear. Then he was gone. Moving back toward the tunnel entrance with that unnatural silence, Elena pressed herself deeper into the alcove, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain it would give her away. She counted her breaths in for 4, out for 4, trying to calm the panic clawing at her chest. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Multiple sets, moving with military precision, spread out. Someone commanded in Russian. He can't have gone far. Elena held her breath, the chamber filled with armed figures, 6, maybe 7. She couldn't be sure in the dim light. They moved like professionals, weapons raised, covering angles with practiced efficiency. For a moment, nothing happened. The guards searched the space, checking corners and columns, their boots grinding against ancient stone. Then Volkov dropped from the ceiling. He landed among them like a falling star, and chaos erupted. The first guard went down with his throat torn open before he could scream. The second managed a shot, not a gun, Elena realized, but something that hissed and sparked before Volkov twisted his arm backward and drove him into the stone floor. The remaining guards converged, and Elena watched in horrified fascination as Volkov fought with a precision that transcended violence. He didn't waste movement. Every strike served multiple purposes: disarm, disable, position for the next attack. He used their momentum against them, turned their numbers into a disadvantage in the confined space. But he was outnumbered, and they had weapons designed for creatures like him. One blade caught his shoulder, opening a line of black blood that looked wrong in the phosphorescent light. Another guard managed to drive something into his side, a stake. Elena realized with sick clarity, and Volkov's composure cracked for the first time. He snarled, a sound that raised every hair on Elena's body, and tore the stake free. The guard responsible died quickly, but 2 more were already moving in, and Elena saw the trap closing. They were herding him, backing him toward the far wall, where another figure waited, larger than the others, holding something that pulsed with dark energy. Elena's hand found a loose stone on the alcove floor. She didn't think, didn't plan, just threw. The stone struck the large guard's temple with a wet crack. Not enough to kill, but enough to break his concentration. The pulsing weapon discharged early, its energy scorching stone instead of flesh. Volkov used the distraction. He moved like lightning, closing the distance, and the large guard fell with a look of surprised betrayal frozen on his face. The last 2 guards ran. Silence settled over the chamber, broken only by Volkov's harsh breathing, unnecessary for a creature who didn't need air. Elena realized, but a reflex from whatever humanity he'd once possessed. He turned to face the alcove, blood staining his shirt, his coat torn. His eyes had gone completely black, and when he spoke, his voice carried an edge that made her bones ache. I told you not to move. You were losing, Elena said quietly, stepping from her hiding place. I was managing. You were about to die. His expression shifted, the inhuman darkness receding slightly. Perhaps, he glanced at the bodies, his jaw tight. We need to move, now. He crossed to her, and this time, when he took her hand, it felt less like restraint and more like partnership. Thank you, he said, so quietly she almost missed it. Then they ran again, deeper into the catacombs, leaving the dead behind them in the dark. Chapter 4. Wounds in the Lamplife safe house was nothing like Elena expected. She'd imagined something gothic, all dark velvet and ornate furniture, fitting the vampire aesthetic. Instead, Volkov led her into a modest apartment above a closed bookshop in the River District. The space was clean but sparse. A worn sofa, a kitchen table with 2 chairs, bookshelves lining every wall. A single lamp cast warm light over stacks of journals and maps. Human. The space felt human. Volkov locked the door behind them, throwing 3 separate bolts and muttering something in a language Elena didn't recognize. The air shimmered briefly, and she felt a pressure settle over the room like invisible weight. Wards, he explained, catching her expression. Old magic. They'll hide us from tracking spells and scrying. Not permanent, but it will buy us time. He moved toward the kitchen, his movements slower than before. The wounds from the fight were taking their toll. The shoulder injury still bled sluggishly, and he favored his left side where the stake had pierced him. Sit, Elena said, pointing to the sofa. Let me look at those. I'll heal. But even as he said it, he swayed slightly. When? Because you're bleeding all over your floor, and I don't know enough about vampire physiology to know if that's a problem or not. She shrugged off the borrowed coat, rolling up her sleeves. I took a wilderness first aid course. I know it's not the same, but I can at least clean the wounds. Volkov studied her for a long moment, and Elena wondered what he saw. A fragile mortal playing at bravery, probably. Someone who'd stumbled into his world and didn't understand the rules. But he sat. Elena found clean towels in the bathroom. A basin of water, antiseptic that probably wouldn't help, but made her feel useful. She returned to find Volkov had removed his ruined shirt, revealing a torso mapped with old scars, white lines that suggested violence survived over decades, maybe centuries. The fresh wounds looked angry against his pale skin. The shoulder cut was deep, the edges black rather than red. The stake wound in his side was worse, a puncture that went deep, surrounded by discolored flesh. That stake, Elena said carefully, kneeling beside the sofa. It wasn't ordinary wood, was it? Silver core, blessed by their house priests, meant to prevent healing. His jaw tightened as she pressed a clean towel to his shoulder. It will fade, but slower than I'd like. Elena worked in silence, cleaning the wounds with gentle efficiency. She'd done this for Margot once, after a kitchen accident, her sister too proud to go to the hospital, Elena too scared to leave her alone. The memory made her chest ache. You're thinking about someone, Volkov said quietly. Elena's hands stilled. How did you know? Your heartbeat changed. Grief has a particular rhythm. He watched her with those unsettling eyes, less black now, fading back to their strange ice color. Who did you lose? She shouldn't answer. Shouldn't offer this stranger, this creature, pieces of herself. But the lamplight made everything feel confessional, and she was so tired of carrying Margot's death alone. My sister. 3 months ago. Car accident. Elena returned to cleaning his wounds, focusing on the task to avoid his gaze. Drunk driver. Red light. Wrong place. Wrong time. All the meaningless phrases people say when someone dies young. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but something in his tone suggested he understood loss intimately. Elena glanced up, finding unexpected gentleness in his expression. How old are you? She asked. Really? 247. He said it casually, as if discussing the weather. I was turned during the Napoleonic Wars, a battlefield in Russia, winter of 1812. Elena's hands paused on his shoulder. You've watched everyone you knew die, eventually. Though most died in the war itself quick, at least. The slow deaths are harder. The ones where you watch them fade year by year, while you remain unchanged. She resumed her work, moving to the stake wound. This one would need pressure. Is that why you're alone? Because it's easier than losing people. Yes. No hesitation. And because my world is dangerous for mortals. You saw that tonight. I'm still here, which is either brave or foolish. I haven't decided which. Elena pressed the towel firmly against his side, and Volkov hissed, the first real sign of pain she'd seen from him. Sorry, she murmured. Don't be. Pain means I'm healing. He watched her work, something shifting in his expression. You saved my life tonight. In the catacombs. You saved mine first. In the gallery. That was self-preservation. You warned me I owed you protection. His hand rose, hesitated, then settled gently over hers where it pressed against his wound. But what you did in the catacombs, you had no reason to risk yourself. You could have stayed hidden. His skin was cool under her palm, not quite cold, like marble that had been kept from the sun. Elena found herself acutely aware of the contact, of how close they were in the lamplight, of the intimacy of tending his wounds, while he looked at her with something almost like wonder. I told you, she said quietly. I'm tired of watching bad things happen. You're going to get yourself killed, maybe, but at least I'll go down fighting. Volkov's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. Absent or deliberate, she couldn't tell. You remind me of someone. A long time ago. His voice carried old grief. She refused to accept the world as it was too. Thought she could change things through sheer stubbornness. What happened to her? She succeeded. Then the world killed her anyway. He pulled his hand back, the moment breaking. That's the lesson, Elena. Courage gets you noticed. Being noticed gets you dead. Elena sat back on her heels, studying him. Blood still stained his skin, his wounds still wept. Darkness. But his color looked better, stronger. The Krovnaya house, she said. Why do they want you dead? Volkov's expression shuddered. That's a long story. We have time. You said the wards would hide us. For tonight, yes. Tomorrow? He shook his head. Tomorrow everything changes. They'll escalate. Send someone. I can't fight. Then tell me now. If I'm going to die in your world, I at least deserve to know why. He looked at her for a long moment, weighing something she couldn't read. Then he sighed another unnecessary human gesture and began to speak. I am not just Volkov. I am Dmitry Volkov, House Tenebrail, Lord of the Northern Court. His voice carried weight. Now, ceremony. And I committed the unforgivable sin among our kind. Elena waited. I refused a blood oath. Denied the Krovnaya house's claim to my territory. His smile was bitter. In vampire politics, that's tantamount to declaring war. Chapter 5. The rules of blood. Elena moved to the kitchen table, needing distance from the intimacy of tending his wounds, from the unexpected warmth of his hand on hers. She poured water from a pitcher into the glasses, then caught herself he probably didn't drink water, but when she glanced back, Volkov had followed her, settling into the opposite chair. He accepted the glass with a nod of thanks, and though he didn't drink, he held it like the gesture mattered. Explain it to me, Elena said. All of it. Houses, blood oaths, whatever rules govern your world. Volkov traced the rim of his glass, his gaze distant. Vampires organize into houses, ancient bloodlines with territories, politics, hierarchies. Think of them as noble families, but the feuds last centuries, and the stakes are literal. A pause. House Tenebrail has ruled the northern territories for 400 years. We value independence, scholarship, restraint. We feed by consent, keep our existence hidden, avoid unnecessary killing. And the Krovnaya house. His jaw tightened. Their old world, brutal. They believe mortals exist to serve, that power comes through domination. They've been expanding south for decades, absorbing smaller houses, forcing alliances through blood oaths. Elena leaned forward. What's a blood oath exactly? A binding made in blood, the most serious contract among our kind. When two vampires share blood and speak the words, they're connected. Commands must be obeyed. Betrayal causes physical pain. It's slavery dressed as alliance. His fingers curled around the glass. 3 months ago, the Krovnaya's head, Victor Krovnaya, demanded I swear fealty, offer my territory, my house's resources, my people to his expansion. You refused. I refused. Something fierce entered his expression. I won't enslave myself or those under my protection. So Victor sent assassins. Tonight was the 4th attempt. Elena processed this, her mind cataloging implications. If they keep failing, why not just declare open war? The old laws, the code that governs all houses. Volkov finally took a small sip of water, more for show than need. Wars require justification before the council, proof of offense, evidence of violation. Victor can't simply invade without appearing tyrannical. But if I die to unfortunate circumstances, he gestured vaguely. My house falls into chaos, and he moves in as a stabilizing force. That's why the assassins, Elena said slowly, make it look like random violence, claim concern for the territory, and absorb your house as a mercy. Precisely. You understand politics. I understand predators. She met his gaze. My sister's ex-boyfriend stalked her for months before the accident. The system couldn't do anything. He was too careful, too calculated. He made it look like coincidence every time he showed up. Her hands tightened on her glass. The night she died, she was driving to my apartment because he'd found out where she lived. She never made it. Volkov was quiet for a moment. You think the accident wasn't an accident? I know it wasn't. The driver was one of his friends, but I couldn't prove it. And the police? She shook her head. They saw a drunk driving incident. Case closed. That's why you warned me tonight. Why you stayed. Understanding softened his expression. You saw someone else about to die to a predator's careful plan. Elena didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Volkov set down his glass, leaning back in his chair. The wounds on his shoulder and side had stopped bleeding, she noticed. Already starting to close, though black veins still traced the edges. There's something else you should understand, he said quietly. About my kind and blood. Elena's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. I'm listening. We need blood to survive, that much is true. But not as much as stories suggest. Once a week, maybe twice if we've been injured or used significant power. And we don't need to kill. He met her eyes. Feeding can be intimate, pleasurable for both parties if done correctly. The venom we produce dulls pain, creates euphoria. Some mortals become addicted to it. Some mortals, Elena repeated carefully. But not all, not all. Strong-willed individuals can resist the compulsion, refuse the euphoria. They're rare. He paused. You would be one of them, I think. How do you know? Because you're sitting here having this conversation instead of running. Because you threw a rock at an armed guard to save a monster. A slight smile. Because when I touched your hand earlier, your heartbeat didn't spike with fear. Curiosity, yes. Wariness. But not terror. Elena's cheeks warmed. She had noticed her reaction, the strange lack of fear, despite everything she'd witnessed. Is that normal? No, Volkov's gaze intensified. Most mortals who learn what I am either flee or freeze. You did neither. It's unusual. Maybe I'm just in shock. Perhaps. Or perhaps you recognize that monsters come in many forms, and not all of them have fangs. The lamplight flickered, casting shadows across his face. Elena found herself studying him, the sharp lines of his jaw, the old scars mapping his chest, the way he held himself with perfect stillness except when he chose to move. He looked like a Renaissance painting, beautiful and slightly wrong, as if the artist had captured something too precise to be entirely human. If I'm staying here, Elena said, breaking the moment, I need to understand all the rules. What can kill you? What are you capable of? What should I never do? Volkov considered this. Practical. I approve. He ticked items off on his fingers. Sunlight weakens us severely, not instant death, but painful and disabling. We sleep during the day, not in coffins, just deep rest in secure locations. Silver burns. Decapitation kills. Wooden stakes through the heart paralyze, but only blessed stakes prevent healing. Religious symbols? Only if the wielder has genuine faith. It's the belief that matters, not the object. And feeding? His expression grew serious. I don't feed from the unwilling, ever. Those who provide blood do so with full knowledge and consent, usually in exchange for protection or payment. It's a transaction, nothing more. But the euphoria, I control the venom. I can feed without triggering the pleasure response, though it's more difficult. He leaned forward slightly. I'm telling you this because if you're going to survive in my world, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Not just with me, but with others of my kind. Victor's people won't show you the same courtesy. Elena swallowed. Meaning? Meaning, if they capture you, they'll use you. Drain you slowly, break your mind with venom until you tell them everything, then kill you for sport. His voice was flat, clinical. Your leverage against me now. Evidence I've involved a mortal in house politics. That alone could turn the council against me. Then why did you bring me here? Volkov held her gaze. Because leaving you would have been murder. And I've done many terrible things into centuries, but I won't add that to the list. Outside, church bells tolled 3 times. Dawn was still hours away, but the night felt suddenly fragile. Chapter 6. The hunter's approach attack came at dawn. Elena had fallen asleep on the sofa, exhaustion finally overcoming adrenaline. She woke to Volkov's hand covering her mouth, his other finger pressed to his lips in a gesture for silence. The lamp had been extinguished. Pale gray light leaked through gaps in the curtains. He removed his hand slowly, and Elena sat up, her heart already racing. What, someone's testing the wards, he whispered. Professional. They're not trying to break through, just mapping the boundaries. Elena strained to hear anything beyond the normal sounds of the city, waking vendors setting up in the street below, distant traffic, birdsong. Nothing unusual. But Volkov's expression was grim. He moved to the window with inhuman care, peering through a gap in the curtains without disturbing them. How many? Elena asked quietly. 1, but that's worse. He stepped back from the window. Victor sent a hunter. The way he said the word made it a title. Elena stood. joining him away from the windows. Explain. Hunters are specialized vampires trackers, assassins, interrogators. They work alone, patient, and precise. This one will watch us, learn our patterns, wait for the perfect moment to strike. Volkov's jaw tightened. The wards will keep him out, but they won't last past sunset. And I'm still healing. The silver wounds are taking longer than normal. Elena glanced at his shoulder. The wound had closed to an angry red line, but the black veins remained, spreading slightly under his skin like poisoned roots. What do we do? I need to sleep. Daylight rest accelerates healing. He moved toward a door she'd assumed was a closet. It opened to reveal a windowless bedroom, the walls lined with heavy fabric. But that leaves you vulnerable. The wards will hold against the hunter. But there are other threats. Victor might send mortal agents, someone who can move during daylight. He hesitated, and Elena saw the calculation in his eyes, weighing her safety against his need to heal. I can stay awake, fight through the day weakness if necessary, and be useless tonight when the real attack comes. Elena shook her head. No, you sleep. I'll watch. Elena, I'm not helpless. I warned you once, saved you once. I can manage a few hours of guard duty. She tried for confidence she didn't entirely feel. Besides, you said it yourself, I'm stubborn. That counts for something. Volkov studied her, and something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of trust. There's a phone in the kitchen drawer. Speed dial 1 reaches Marcus, my second in command. If anything happens, anything at all, you call him immediately. Marcus, Elena repeated. Got it. And Elena? Volkov's hand found her shoulder, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew it contained. Don't try to be a hero. If someone breaches the wards, you run. The window in the bedroom leads to a fire escape. Take it down to the alley. Head for crowds. Stay in daylight. What about you? I'll manage. I always do. But the lie was transparent, and they both knew it. He held her gaze a moment longer, then withdrew to the bedroom. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Elena alone in the growing daylight. She found the phone, an old flip model, prepaid and anonymous, and kept it in her pocket. Then she settled at the kitchen table, with a view of both the front door and the main window, and waited. The morning stretched. Elena watched the street below through careful gaps in the curtains. The bookshop's owner arrived at 9, unlocking the door beneath their apartment. Normal foot traffic passed: mothers with strollers, students with backpacks, an old man walking a terrier, and one figure who didn't belong. He stood across the street, leaning against a lamppost with manufactured casualness. Tall, dark coat despite the mild weather, face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't move like someone waiting for a bus or meeting a friend. He moved like someone watching. The hunter. Elena's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain still. Don't react. Don't give away that you've noticed. She moved away from the window, keeping her movements natural, and began exploring the apartment more thoroughly. The bookshelves held volumes in multiple languages: Russian, French, Latin, languages she didn't recognize. Maps covered one wall, marked with symbols and notes in Volkov's precise handwriting. Territories, she realized. House boundaries, safe routes, places of power. In the kitchen, she found a locked drawer, tested it carefully. Solid. The phone in her pocket buzzed. Elena jumped, her heart lurching. She pulled it out with shaking hands. A text message from an unknown number. Tell Dmitri the council requests his presence. 3 nights. Neutral ground. Come alone or face sanction. Elena stared at the message. Not a threat exactly, but not an invitation either. She should wake Volkov. This felt important, but he needed rest, needed healing. And the message said 3 nights. There was time. Elena pocketed the phone and returned to her watch position. The hunter had moved. Now he stood in a doorway diagonal to the bookshop, still watching, still patient. Hours crawled past. Elena's mind drifted to Margot, to the last conversation they'd had. Her sister had called the night she died, voice tight with fear. He found me, Lena. He knows where I work. I'm coming to you. Elena had told her to call the police, to get a restraining order, to follow the proper channels. The proper channels had gotten her sister killed. She wouldn't make that mistake again. Around 2 in the afternoon, the hunter finally moved. He walked away with unhurried strides, disappearing around a corner. Elena waited, tense, for him to return. He didn't, but Elena's relief was short-lived, because she understood strategy, now understood predators. The hunter hadn't given up. He'd simply confirmed what he needed to know. They were trapped. The wards kept them safe, but also kept them stationary. And when sunset came, when the protection faded and Volkov was still weakened from silver poisoning, the hunter would return. And he'd bring others. Elena looked at the locked drawer again. Whatever Volkov kept secured there, she suspected they'd need it. She found a hairpin in the bathroom, straightened it, and set to work on the lock. Her hands shook, but the mechanism was old. After 15 minutes of careful manipulation, something clicked. Inside the drawer, 3 vials of dark liquid, a silver dagger wrapped in cloth, and a leather journal bound with a lock of black hair. Elena reached for the journal, then hesitated. This felt like a violation, an invasion of privacy that crossed a line, but Margot's voice whispered, "You can't afford to be polite when lives are at stake." She took the journal and began to read. Chapter 7. Secrets in ink. The journal's pages were yellowed with age, the handwriting precise, but occasionally marred by what looked like blood stains. Elena sat at the kitchen table, the afternoon light fading toward evening, and read Volkov's secrets. October 1847. I have failed her. Katerina begged me to turn her, to save her from the consumption eating her lungs. I refused. Better to die human than live as I do eternal, hollow, watching everyone you love turn to dust. She died cursing my name. I deserve worse. March 1863. The American war has given Victor new hunting grounds. He sends his people across the ocean, recruiting desperate soldiers, offering immortality in exchange for loyalty. The Krovnaya house grows stronger while the council does nothing. They're cowards, all of them. July 1901. Found a child in the ruins of the house fire. 11 years old, parents dead, nowhere to go. I should have left her for the orphanage. Instead, I kept her safe until she was grown, watched her marry, have children of her own, attended her funeral 60 years later. This is why we don't love mortals. This is why I must remain alone. Elena's chest tightened. Every entry told the same story: loneliness, loss, a man trying desperately not to care and failing every time. November 1982. Victor proposed the blood oath again. I refused again. He's planning something. I can feel it in the way his people watch my territory, the questions they ask my sources. War is coming, and I'm not strong enough to fight it alone. January 2025. The attacks have begun. He's testing my defenses, looking for weaknesses. Marcus says I should flee, abandon the territory, start over somewhere Victor hasn't corrupted. But this is my home. 4 centuries of work, of building something better than the old ways. I won't surrender it without a fight. The journal ended there. Elena closed it carefully, her mind racing. Volkov wasn't just fighting for territory, he was fighting for a principle, for the possibility that vampires could be something more than monsters. And he was losing. A sound from the bedroom made Elena jump. She quickly returned the journal to the drawer, secured the lock with the hairpin, and composed herself just as Volkov emerged. He looked better, the black veins had faded, the wounds nearly invisible. But exhaustion still lined his face, and he moved with the careful deliberation of someone managing pain. The hunter? He asked. Left around 2. Hasn't returned. Elena gestured to the phone on the table. But you got a message. From the council. Volkov read it, his expression darkening. 3 nights. They want me vulnerable, away from my defenses. He set the phone down with controlled force. It's a trap. Could it be legitimate? The council doesn't request they summon. And they never offer neutral ground. They meet in their stronghold, surrounded by their power. He moved to the window, checking the street with practiced caution. Victor's manipulating them, making it look official, forcing me to either comply and walk into an ambush, or refuse and appear guilty of defying the council. Elena processed this. So what do you do? Survive the next 3 nights. Gather evidence of Victor's interference. Present it to the council myself, on my terms. He turned to face her. But first, we need to deal with tonight's attack. You think the hunter will strike? The hunter and whoever Victor sends as backup. Volkov's gaze was steady, grim. The wards fail at sunset. We have perhaps an hour after that. Before they move, they'll want full darkness, minimal witnesses. Elena's mouth went dry. Can you fight them? With the silver still in your system? I'll have to. He moved to the locked drawer, opened it with a key Elena hadn't seen him carrying, and removed the 3 vials. Emergency rations. Blood from willing donors, preserved with old magic. It will help, but it won't fully restore me. He uncorked 1 vial and drank it in a single swallow. Elena watched his pupils dilate, the remaining black veins fade further. Healing but not healed. The dagger, Elena said, pointing to the silver blade. Can I use it? Volkov paused. You want to fight? I want to survive. And you said it yourself, I'm leverage now. If they capture me, they'll use me against you. She met his gaze. I'd rather go down fighting. Something flickered in his expression, approval mixed with concern. He lifted the dagger, testing its weight, then handed it to her. Handle first. Silver burns vampires on contact. A good strike to major arteries will incapacitate them long enough for me to finish them. He demonstrated the grip, adjusting her fingers. Don't slash thrust. Go for the throat or stomach. And don't hesitate. They won't. His hand lingered on hers, cool and steady. Elena was acutely aware of the intimacy, him teaching her to kill his own kind, trusting her with a weapon that could harm him just as easily. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. You could have left me at the estate. Could have hidden me somewhere safe and faced this alone. Volkov's thumb brushed her wrist, tracing the pulse point. I've spent 2 centuries pushing people away, telling myself it was mercy, that I was protecting them from my world. His gaze held hers. But maybe I was just protecting myself from caring when they inevitably left. And now I'm tired of being alone. Tired of watching from the shadows while mortals live and love and make their brief lights matter. His voice dropped. You reminded me what courage looks like. What it means to fight even when you're terrified. Elena's breath caught. The space between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. She could lean forward, close the distance, find out if his lips were as cool as his hands. Instead, she stepped back, putting the dagger on the table. We should prepare. You said an hour? Volkov blinked, the moment breaking. Yes, an hour. They worked in focused silence. Volkov checked the wards one final time, reinforcing them with whispered words and symbols drawn in his own blood. Elena found candles, distributed them throughout the apartment. Old magic, Volkov explained. Fire that vampires respected, even if it didn't harm them. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. The wards shimmered once, twice, then faded like morning mist. They're coming, Volkov said quietly. Elena gripped the silver dagger, her palms sweating despite the cool handle. Through the window, she saw figures emerging from alleys, from doorways, from shadows that shouldn't have held them. 6 at least, maybe more. The hunter led them. His face visible now, sharp features, ice-pale skin, eyes that reflected lamplight like an animal's. He looked up at their window and smiled. Then he raised one hand, and the attack began. Chapter 8. The Seagoth first vampire came through the window. Glass exploded inward, and Elena barely had time to raise her arms before Volkov was there, catching the attacker mid-leap. They crashed into the bookshelf, volumes tumbling. Volkov's hand found the vampire's throat, twisted, and there was a sickening crack. One down, the front door splintered. 2 more vampires poured through, moving with that terrible speed. Elena pressed her back against the kitchen wall, dagger raised, trying to stay out of Volkov's way as he engaged them both. He was magnificent and terrifying, economy of motion, brutal efficiency. But she could see the silver poisoning affecting him. His movements were fractionally slower than in the catacombs, his reactions just slightly delayed. One of the attackers noticed, feinted left, then struck right, catching Volkov's injured shoulder. He hissed, and the momentary distraction cost him. The second vampire got inside, his guard, driving him backward toward the bedroom. The third vampire turned toward Elena, female, blonde, beautiful in that unsettling vampire way. She smiled, fangs visible, and tilted her head like a curious predator. The mortal pet, she said in accented English. Victor will pay extra if we bring you alive. Elena's grip tightened on the dagger. He'll have to settle for disappointed. The vampire laughed and lunged. Elena didn't think, just moved. Muscle memory from the self-defense class Margot had made her take. She sidestepped, brought the dagger up in the thrust Volkov had shown her, and felt silver meet flesh. The vampire shrieked. The sound was inhuman, piercing, and she stumbled backward with Elena's dagger buried in her shoulder. Smoke rose from the wound, the smell of burning meat filling the apartment. Elena backed toward the kitchen, her hands shaking. She'd done it. She'd actually. The vampire tore the dagger free and threw it aside, her face contorting with rage. The wound smoked and bled black, but it wasn't enough. Wasn't fatal. You'll pay for that, little girl. She advanced, and Elena grabbed the nearest thing, a cast iron pan from the stove. She swung it like a club, connected with the vampire's temple. The creature staggered, more surprised than hurt. Then Volkov was there, appearing beside Elena in that blur of motion, and his hand punched through the vampire's chest. He withdrew it, holding something dark and pulsing, crushed it, and the vampire collapsed. Behind you. Elena screamed. Volkov spun, caught another attacker's blade barehanded, and drove his elbow into the vampire's face. Bone crunched. But 3 more were climbing through the broken window, and Elena could hear more on the stairs outside. To many, they were being overwhelmed. The bedroom. Volkov shouted. Now. Elena ran, scooping up the silver dagger as she passed. Volkov followed, fighting backward, keeping himself between her and their attackers. They made it through the door, and he slammed it shut, throwing the bolt. He wouldn't hold long. Already, fists pounded against the wood, shaking the frame. The bedroom was small, just a bed, a dresser, and the window Volkov had mentioned leading to the fire escape. Elena moved toward it, but Volkov caught her arm. They'll have people waiting below. That's where they expect us to run. Then what do we do? The door cracked, splinters flying. A hand thrust through, groping for the bolt. Volkov moved to the dresser, pulled out a small wooden box, and opened it to reveal what looked like dark, crystallized honey. Blood amber, he said quickly. Concentrated essence. It will restore me, but the cost. He hesitated. I'll lose control for a few minutes. The bloodlust will take over. I won't be able to distinguish friend from enemy. The door crashed open. 4 vampires flooded in, the hunter behind them, watching with predatory patience. Elena made the decision. She grabbed the blood amber and shoved it into Volkov's hand. Do it. I'll hide. Elena, do it. He crushed the amber in his fist, and the change was immediate. His eyes went completely black, pupils blown so wide no iris remained. His fangs extended, longer than she'd seen before. The veins on his neck and arms darkened to obsidian, and when he moved, it was like watching liquid shadow given form. The first vampire died before Elena saw him move. The second tried to flee and made it to steps. The third fought back. He was older, stronger, but Volkov tore through him like wet paper. The hunter stepped forward, finally engaging. He was different from the others, controlled, calculating. He matched Volkov's speed, anticipated his strikes. They crashed through the bedroom wall into the main apartment, a blur of violence that shook the entire building. Elena pressed herself into the corner behind the bed, making herself as small as possible. Volkov had said he wouldn't be able to tell friend from enemy. She had to stay hidden, stay silent, and pray. He regained control before a hand clamped over her mouth. Elena's scream died in her throat. She was yanked backward, away from the corner, and found herself staring into cold eyes behind a familiar face. The hunter's second, who'd been waiting while his master provided distraction. Clever, he whispered in Russian. But not clever enough. He dragged her toward the window, the fire escape, where 2 more vampires waited in the alley below. Elena struggled, tried to bite, but his grip was iron. The silver dagger had fallen somewhere in the chaos, useless. Through the doorway, she saw Volkov throw the hunter through the kitchen table. Saw him turn, nostrils flaring, scenting the air. His black eyes found her, registered the vampire holding her, and something terrible entered his expression. The second vampire realized his mistake too late. Volkov crossed the distance in less than a heartbeat. He caught the vampire by the throat, lifted him one-handed, and without breaking eye contact with Elena, crushed his windpipe. The body dropped, and Volkov stood there, chest heaving with unnecessary breath, blood staining his hands and face. For a moment, Elena thought he might attack her anyway. The bloodlust was still there, burning in those black eyes. Then slowly, deliberately, he stepped back. Out, he said, his voice rough, barely human. Fire escape. Now, while I still, he cut off, his jaw clenching. Go. Elena scrambled for the window, but paused on the threshold. The hunter was rising in the other room, battered, but not beaten. More vampires climbed the stairs, their footsteps echoing. I'm not leaving you, she said. Volkov's laugh was harsh. Stubborn woman. Then stay close. And don't get between me and them. The hunter appeared in the doorway, blood streaming from a head wound. He smiled, cold and professional. Impressive display, Dmitri. But you're burning through your reserves. How much longer can you maintain that form? Volkov said nothing, but Elena saw the truth in the slight tremor in his hands. He was fading. The hunter noticed too. Surrender. Give us the girl. Victor might let you live as a servant. Never. Then die together. How romantic. The hunter raised his hand, and the vampires on the stairs rushed forward as one. Elena grabbed Volkov's arm. "Trust me," she whispered, and before he could protest, she pulled them both through the window onto the fire escape. Chapter 9. Ashes and Aftermath. The fire escape groaned under their weight. Elena didn't look down. 3 stories of rusted metal and empty air just pulled Volkov after her. Climbing up instead of down. Wrong direction, he growled, but followed, his movements still predatory, still not entirely controlled. "Exactly," Elena gasped. "They expect us to run, so we go up, behind them." Vampires poured onto the fire escape. The metal shrieked as too much weight stressed ancient bolts. Elena felt the structure shudder. Then with a sound like thunder, the lower section tore free from the building. 3 vampires fell with it, their shrieks cutting off in wet thuds below. But the hunter remained on the apartment level, watching them climb with those cold, patient eyes. He didn't follow, just stood there, waiting. Elena reached the roof, hauling herself over the edge with burning arms. Volkov appeared beside her, still too fast, still too lethal. His eyes had faded from pure black to dark gray, but the bloodlust hadn't entirely left him. "Now what?" he asked, his voice rough. Elena pointed across the rooftops. "We run. Stay high, move fast, lose them in the city. There are 2 more down in the alley. At least 4 still inside." He gripped her shoulder, not gently, but not crushing. "And the hunter will track us. He won't stop until one of us is dead. Then we make him stop." Volkov's expression shifted, surprise, breaking through the bloodlust fog. "You have a plan?" "Half of one." Elena started across the roof, testing her footing on slick tiles. That message from the council, it wasn't just a trap. It was a timeline. Victor needs you dead or compliant before you can reach them. So we don't run. We go to the council now. Tonight, force the confrontation while Victor's people are scattered chasing us. She jumped a gap between buildings, landed hard, kept moving. "You wanted evidence of his interference. Well, he just attacked you with a dozen vampires on neutral ground. That has to violate some kind of law." Volkov followed, his movements growing smoother as control returned. "It does. The old laws forbid unprovoked attacks outside declared territory disputes. But the council moves slowly. They'll need witnesses. Verification. I'm a witness. A mortal witness who saw everything." Elena stopped at the roof's edge, looking down at the street for stories below. Lights from restaurants and bars cast pools of warmth. People walked past, oblivious to the violence above. "And I'm betting Victor can't afford to have me testify." Understanding flickered across Volkov's face. "You want to use yourself as bait. I want to force his hand. Make him choose between killing me publicly, which exposes him, or letting me speak, which proves his guilt." She met his gaze. "Either way, you win. Or we both die. We were dying anyway. At least this way, we're steering toward it." Volkov stared at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened. The gray faded from his eyes, returning to their normal ice blue. When he spoke, his voice was his own again, controlled, precise, human. "You're insane. I'm practical." Elena glanced back. Shadows moved across the rooftops behind them. "Where's the council stronghold?" 2 miles north. Old cathedral, abandoned to mortals, but very much occupied by my kind." He hesitated. "Elena, if we do this, if we walk into the council chambers, there's no going back. You'll be seen, recorded, remembered. Every house will know your face." "Good. Then maybe they'll think twice before trying to kill me." She started toward the fire escape on the building's north side. "Come on. We have a deadline to meet." They moved across the rooftops like ghosts, Volkov guiding her along paths only he could see. Twice they heard pursuit, the scrape of claws on stone, the whisper of movement, but never close enough to catch them. The cathedral rose against the night sky, all Gothic spires and shadows. It looked genuinely abandoned, cracked windows, missing roof tiles, graffiti scarring the ancient stone. But Elena felt power radiating from it, an invisible pressure that made her skin prickle. "Wards," Volkov murmured. "Older and stronger than anything I can cast. Once we pass through, the council will know. They'll send escorts. Whether to protect or imprison us depends on their mood. Only one way to find out." They descended to street level through a narrow alley. The cathedral's main entrance stood before them. Massive oak doors carved with symbols that seemed to writhe in the streetlight. Volkov straightened his torn, blood-stained clothes uselessly, then offered Elena his hand. "Stay close. Let me do the talking." The council respects formality. Any perceived disrespect could turn them against us. Elena took his hand, and they crossed the threshold together. The pressure hit like a wave. Elena's breath caught, her vision, swimming. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, that mortals weren't meant to be here, that she'd violated something fundamental. Then Volkov squeezed her hand, and the pressure eased. Breathe, he said quietly. The wards are testing you, determining if you're a threat, and you're still standing. That's a good sign. The interior was nothing like Elena expected. No pews, no altar, just a vast circular chamber lit by hundreds of candles. Symbols covered every surface, painted in what looked disturbingly like blood. And in the center, seated on 7 stone thrones, were the council. They looked human at first glance. Then Elena noticed the stillness, the too perfect beauty. The eyes that reflected candlelight like cats. The eldest sat in the center throne, a woman who might have been 30 or 3,000, with skin like marble and hair that fell in silver waves. Her gaze settled on Volkov, then Elena, and her expression gave nothing away. Dmitry Volkov, her voice carried like music, like stone grinding. You are summoned for 3 nights hence. This is premature. Forgive the breach of protocol. Elder Kasia, Volkov bowed, formal and precise. But Viktor Kravnaya has forced my hand. He attacked me tonight with 12 vampires, violated neutral ground, and attempted to murder both myself and this mortal witness. Murmurs rippled through the council. One of them, a man with dark skin and gold eyes, leaned forward. A mortal? Here? Dmitry, you know the laws. She's under my protection. And her testimony is vital. Volkov pulled Elena forward gently. Viktor has been orchestrating these attacks for months, trying to force me into a blood oath. Tonight's assault was meant to kill me before I could reach you with evidence. Elder Kasia's gaze fixed on Elena. Child, do you understand where you stand? Elena's mouth was dry, but she forced herself to speak. Yes, Elder, I'm in the council chambers, and I have information about Viktor Kravnaya's crimes. Then speak. Quickly, the night grows short, and Viktor's people will not be far behind. Elena took a breath and began describing everything, the guards speaking Russian, the attacks, the hunter, the siege. She spoke clearly, carefully, leaving out nothing. When she finished, the council was silent. Then Elder Kasia smiled, cold and sharp as winter. Viktor has overstepped. Badly. The cathedral doors exploded inward. The hunter stood in the entrance, flanked by a dozen vampires. And behind them, tall and elegant in a white suit, stood Viktor Kravnaya himself. My dear council, he said smoothly, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Chapter 10. The blood oath broken. Viktor Kravnaya moved like a king entering court, head high, expression serene, every step calculated for maximum effect. His vampires flanked him in perfect formation. The hunter at his right hand. Elena felt Volkov tense beside her, his hand moving instinctively to shield her. Viktor, Elder Kasia's voice remained neutral, but power thrummed beneath it. You enter the council chambers armed and uninvited. Explain yourself. I come seeking justice, Elder. Viktor bowed, the gesture perfectly measured. Dmitry Volkov has kidnapped a mortal, violated the secrecy laws, and murdered my people who were merely investigating reports of his instability. That's a lie, Elena said before Volkov could speak. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. The weight of their attention was crushing, alien minds assessing her worth. But she'd survived worse than scrutiny. She'd survived grief. I came to him willingly, warned him of your assassination plot. Elena stepped forward, ignoring Volkov's restraining hand. Your guards spoke Russian. They didn't know I understood. They planned to kill him during a meeting you'd arranged. Viktor's smile never wavered. The confused testimony of a traumatized mortal. She's clearly been influenced by Dmitry's venom. Her mind compromised. I haven't been fed from, ever. Elena met his gaze directly, refusing to flinch. And your hunter can verify that. Blood leaves traces, doesn't it? Chemical signatures that linger for weeks? The hunter's expression flickered just for a moment. Confirmation. Viktor's smile thinned. Nevertheless, the facts remain. Dmitry has involved a mortal in house politics, brought her to these sacred chambers, and she saved my life. Volkov interrupted, his voice cutting through Viktor's practiced speech. Twice. Once with warning, once with courage. The old laws say nothing against mortals who act of their own free will in defense of a house member. The old laws also forbid unprovoked attacks on neutral ground, Elder Kasia said softly. Viktor, 12 of your people assaulted Dmitry's safe house tonight. Do you deny this? I deny they were mine. Perhaps hired mercenaries, or the hunter stands at your right hand. A different council member spoke, the man with gold eyes. He bears your house mark. Are you claiming he acted without your knowledge? The hunter's jaw tightened. For the first time, uncertainty entered Victor's expression. I sent him to observe only, to verify reports that Dmitri was becoming unstable. Any violence was initiated in self-defense, against a man in his own home? Volkov's voice carried steel. You've been trying to force me into a blood oath for months. When I refused, you sent assassins. When they failed, you escalated. Tonight was meant to be the final attempt. Kill me, claim instability, and absorb my house as a mercy to the territory. Victor's composure cracked. You have no proof. I have a mortal witness with no reason to lie. I have your hunter's presence in my home. I have the bodies of your people on my floor. Volkov pulled something from his pocket, a small recording device Elena hadn't known he carried. And I have this audio from tonight's attack. Your people were quite vocal about who sent them. He pressed play. Voices filled the chamber, Russian commands. Victor's name spoken clearly. Plans discussed in brutal detail. The council members exchanged glances. Elder Kashia's expression remained impassive, but something cold entered her eyes. Victor Krovnaya. You have violated the old laws, attacked a fellow house on neutral ground, attempted to subvert council authority. She rose from her throne, and the temperature in the chamber dropped. You will surrender yourself for judgment, or face immediate sanction. Victor's mask shattered. His face contorted with rage, and he gestured sharply. His vampires surged forward, not toward the council, but toward Elena. Volkov moved like lightning, intercepting the first attacker, but there were too many. The hunter broke left, inhumanly fast, reaching for Elena with clawed hands. The chamber exploded with power. The council members moved as one, and Elena understood why they ruled. They were old, ancient in ways that made Volkov seem young. Their combined power slammed into Victor's forces like a physical wall, and vampires flew backward, crashing into stone. The hunter froze mid-step, held in place by invisible force. Victor himself dropped to his knees, gasping, as Elder Kashias will press down on him. You dare, she whispered, and her voice held the weight of centuries. You dare attack under our roof, threaten a mortal under council protection, challenge our authority. Victor tried to speak, but no sound emerged. His vampires lay scattered, unconscious or paralyzed. Only the hunter remained aware, though trapped. Elder Kashia turned to Volkov. Dmitri, you have brought proof of Victor's crimes. You have protected a mortal witness at great personal cost. The council recognizes your claim. She looked at Elena. And we acknowledge this mortal's bravery. She will be granted protection under the old laws. Any who harm her will face our wrath. Elena's legs almost gave out with relief. As for you, Victor Krovnaya, Elder Kashia's attention returned to the kneeling vampire. Your house is forfeit. Your blood oaths dissolved. Your territory reverts to council oversight pending redistribution. She paused. And you will serve 1 century of binding to Dmitri Volkov, to repay the debt of blood you owe him. Victor's eyes went wide with horror. A blood oath, the very thing he'd tried to force on Volkov, now turned against him. No, he gasped. Please, I'll leave the territories. The sentence is passed. Elder Kashia raised one hand, and Victor screamed as invisible chains locked around him. Dmitri, he is yours to command. Use him wisely. Volkov looked at Victor, the vampire who'd hunted him for months, who'd tried to kill them both tonight, and Elena saw something complicated cross his face. Not triumph. Something sadder. I don't want a slave, he said quietly. I want him gone. Exiled beyond the northern territories, forbidden to return. Elder Kashia tilted her head. Mercy, Dmitri? After everything? Justice, Volkov corrected. He'll live with the knowledge that he lost. That his empire crumbled because he couldn't accept one word. No, the elder considered this, then nodded. So be it. Victor Krovnaya, you are exiled. The hunter and his remaining forces will escort you to the border. If you return, the sentence of binding will be reinstated permanently. Victor was dragged away, still trying to protest, still refusing to accept his defeat. The hunter followed, his expression unreadable. When they were gone, the chamber fell quiet. The council members returned to their thrones, the immediate crisis resolved. Elder Kashia looked at Elena one final time. You have seen our world, mortal, witnessed our justice. You may leave with our protection, return to your life, and never speak of this again. She paused. Or you may choose differently. The choice is yours. Elena looked at Volkov. He stood in the candlelight, battered and exhausted, centuries of loneliness written in his posture. But when his eyes met hers, she saw hope there, fragile and tentative, but real. What happens if I stay? Elena asked. Then you walk into the night on your own terms, Elder Cassia said. No blood oaths, no compulsion, just choice. Elena turned to Volkov. Fully? Earlier, you said you were tired of being alone. Yes, so am I. She took his hand, cool and steady, and laced her fingers through his. Volkov's expression transformed. Not quite a smile, but something close. Something that looked like the beginning of healing. Then stay, he said softly. Not as my possession. Not as my servant. Just stay. Partners? Elena asked. Partners, he agreed. Outside, dawn approached. But in the cathedral chamber, surrounded by candlelight and ancient power, Elena felt something she hadn't felt since Margot died. She felt like she'd come home. Epilogue. 6 months later, Elena walked through Thornwood's restored halls with confidence born of experience. The estate had been rebuilt, the security improved, and the territory now expanded with portions of Victor's former holdings thrived under Volkov's careful management. She'd learned the vampire world's rules, its politics, its dangers. Marcus had become a friend, teaching her defensive techniques that worked against immortal opponents. The council had granted her official status as House Tenebrael's mortal advisor, unprecedented, controversial, and exactly the kind of change Volkov had always wanted. She found him in the library, surrounded by maps and correspondence. He looked up as she entered, and the warmth in his expression still surprised her sometimes. The council sent their approval, Elena said, dropping a letter on his desk. The new treaty with House Noctis is ratified. Excellent. He rose, moving to her side. You're becoming indispensable, you know. Good. That was the plan. She leaned against him, and his arms settled around her waist, natural, now easy. Although Marcus says I still telegraph my left hook too. Obviously, you're human. Some things can't be helped. His lips brushed her temple, cool and gentle. But you're learning. Elena smiled. She hadn't chosen immortality, not yet, maybe not ever. But she'd chosen this, a partnership with a vampire who valued her mind as much as her courage. A place in a world that had initially tried to kill her. And the freedom to make her own choices. Margot would have approved. Outside, the sun set over Thornwood. And inside, in the growing darkness, Elena and Volkov planned their next move in the eternal game of vampire politics, together.